Stop right now, your search is finally over. This is the best rogue leveling build in Diablo 4, point blank period. You can see this build right here runs through mobs, runs through content all the way to level 50 and helps you power level levels 1 to 50 in as quick as even 5 to 6 hours. And once you hit level 20 or 30 with the right aspects, this build comes alive and just mauls every single thing in sight. And it's so fun to play because you move around the map like a bolt of lightning. That being said, I'm going to go over the skills and specializations for this because this build is absolutely nutty. And feel free to check the build guide in the description and the pinned comment because that is going to go over everything from levels 1 to 50 and will be a very good quick reference after I explain everything and how it works. And the guide in the description has a leveling tab so you can see what to take from levels 1 all the way to level 50 in the exact order you should take them. The first ability we're going to start off with is our first basic skill, and this is Puncture. So Puncture is basically our main basic skill we're going to use to deal damage to enemies. This gives us a lucky hit chance that allows us to slow enemies as well while we're using it. And additionally, you're going to want to go into Enhanced Puncture and Fundamental Puncture. What that's going to give us is gaining 2 energy when Puncture damages a crowd control enemy. And then Fundamental Puncture, which now throws 3 blades in a spread. This is very important, and it deals 35% of its base damage. And when you hit an enemy with at least 2 blades, it makes them vulnerable for 2 seconds. So we get to make enemies vulnerable very easily with this skill. And it does a bunch of damage and a great energy generator right off the bat. Then we're going to go into core skills, and our main skill for this build is Twisting Blades. So you're going to grab that, and then you're going to grab Enhanced Twisting Blades and Advanced Twisting Blades. Now, I'll go over this in the DPS rotation, but the key with this is you are going to be dealing a lot of damage with this actual ability. And then after 1.5 seconds, those blades return to you. So essentially what you want to do is hit an enemy and then cross over a bunch of different enemies. So when those blades return, it crosses every enemy and hits every enemy with a huge couple hits. And again, that Enhanced Twisting Blade here is going to deal 30% increased damage when returning, which is how we want to position ourselves so those blades return and hit as many enemies as possible. And then Advanced Twisting Blades, so when your blades return, your active cooldowns are reduced by 0.10 seconds per enemy they pass through. We also want the Sturdy passive. This is going to give us 12% close damage reduction, which is great for early game. And then we're going to grab Stutter Step, which critically striking an enemy grants 15% of movement speed for 4 seconds. And this gives us a bunch more movement speed when we critically strike, but we are going to take this later on at a higher level. Then we're going to grab Shadow Step. This is going to be one of our main movement abilities. This is going to make us unstoppable. So if you get frozen or something like that, you can cast Shadow Step and it will essentially break out of all of those crowd controlling effects like that. And then eventually we want to get Enhanced Shadow Step and Methodical Shadow Step. This will make it so it increases our critical strike chance. When we damage an enemy with Enhanced Shadow Step, such as like a boss, this is going to give us increased critical strike chance against them by 8% for 3 seconds. So it ups our crit strike chance very highly. And then Methodical, where enemies damaged by Shadow Step are stunned for 2 seconds. So we also get the stun there. It allows us to do stun damage, and obviously they can't attack us. So then our secondary move ability is going to be Dash. Dash is going to make it so that we can dash in between and across our screen very, very quickly. So this is great for using Twisting Blades and attacking a group of enemies and then dashing across all of them so your blades return to you and hit every enemy on the way. We're also going to later grab Enhanced Dash, so enemies damaged by Dash take 15% increased crit strike damage from you. And then Methodical Dash, where dealing damage to a crowd control enemy with Dash reduces its charge cooldown by 0.5 seconds or up to 4 seconds per cast. So with this we can actually reduce our cooldowns pretty significantly. And then the only passive we want to grab here is Weapon Mastery. So our daggers, swords, bows, and crossbows do a lot more damage. And we'll talk about this later, but ideally you want to just use whatever weapon gives you the most DPS at the start of the game. This is going to be swords primarily, so feel free to use those. You get increased damage with this Weapon Mastery passive. Next, we're going to come down here and grab our Subterfuge skill. This is going to be Dark Shroud. The Dark Shroud is going to give us 5 protective shadows around our character, and we gain 8.4% damage reduction per active shadow. This is going to give us a ton of damage reduction, so we can have up to almost 50% damage reduction with all of these up. And then we're going to want to grab Enhanced Dark Shroud. This has a 14% chance to not consume an actual Dark Shroud shadow. And then Subverting Dark Shroud, where each active shadow from Dark Shroud grants you 4% increased movement speed. This is a big one early game because you can constantly cast this and keep this up. You have 5 shadows around you at all times, and that again gives you 20% movement speed automatically. It makes leveling with this build so much better. Eventually we want to grab Agile for the dodge chance for 30 seconds. And then Exploit, where you deal 18% increased damage to healthy and injured enemies. And then Malice, where you deal 9% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Then we want to come down here to Imbuement. So I use the Shadow Imbuement. Now this is really, really good for a couple of reasons. So the Shadow Imbuement in particular, you can see your next 2 imbuable skills after casting a Shadow Imbuement deal shadow damage and infect enemies for 6 seconds. Now, if you hit a bunch of enemies with that imbuement, let's say Twisting Blades as an example, and you infect those enemies for 6 seconds, infected enemies explode on death and deal a bunch of damage to all surrounding enemies. So essentially this acts as like a big shadow fireball. So if you hit a couple enemies with this and one of them starts to explode, it'll explode the next and the next and the next all the way around them and basically just blow up every enemy all at once. And then you want to go and grab Enhanced Shadow Imbuement, so you have a 15% increased critical strike chance against injured enemies, and then Blended Shadow Imbuement, where the primary explosion for the skill makes enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. And then you want to grab Shadow Crash, which gives us an extra % chance to stun, but we want that to mainly grab Consuming Shadows 3 out of 3. This way, each time you kill an enemy with shadow damage, you generate 30 energy. And then we want to grab the passive Precision Imbuement here. Imbued skills gain 9% increased critical strike chance. That's going to add even more damage and crit strike to the Shadow Imbuement. We don't want any of these ultimate skills. We just want the Innervation passive for Lucky Hit, up to a 30% chance to gain 8 energy, again helping with our energy generation. And then 1 point in Adrenaline Rush so we can get down to haste. So while at or above 50% max energy, you get 50% increased move speed, which we'll be getting almost all of the time. And then if we are below that maximum energy, we gain increased attack speed. And once you have all those skills, the last one here is the key passive, and you just want momentum. And essentially cutthroat skills here, which would be Twisting Blades. Once we cast that, it grants a stack of momentum for 8 seconds if they hit either a stunned, dazed, or frozen enemy, or hit an enemy from behind, meaning you can generate maximum stacks with the skill insanely easy, like in the blink of an eye. It's almost instant. And then while at 3 stacks of momentum, keep almost all the time while fighting any group of enemies, you gain 20% increased damage reduction, great for survivability, 30% increased energy regeneration, allowing us to have, again, infinite energy very, very easily, and then increased movement speed. So quick, I'm going to talk about our specialization. Once you reach level 15 with the Rogue, what it's going to allow you to do is pick between these 3 things once you unlock them at different levels. Once you unlock Inner Sight, you're going to pick this, and this is our key specialization here. It kind of makes the whole build come together, and you unlock that, I believe, at level 20, and it starts making you really OP. So what this does is it attacks marked. What this does is when attacking marked enemies, it fills up your insight gauge, which is your gauge over here, this gauge right here. Once this is filled up, essentially what that does, you can see right here, when it's full, you gain unlimited energy for 4 seconds. Once that synergizes with our skills and we start blowing people up with our Shadow Imbuement all around us, it's going to very quickly in succession kill the enemies with this symbol on them, fill up your insight meter almost instantly, and that allows us to again have unlimited energy for 4 seconds, where we can just spam Twisting Blades on an enemy or a boss. Now really quickly, I'll throw up the stats you want ideally for some of these pieces on the screen, but in order to level very, very quickly, this build is so quick, so fast. Ideally, you just want to put anything on that has movement speed. That is the biggest part to this build. You can follow the other stats here to give you a little bit extra damage and stuff like that, but that doesn't necessarily matter at this point. That starts being important after level 50, but until you get to level 50, primarily focus on movement speed. And I'm going to show you these aspects, and these aspects single-handedly took me at level 25 from hitting like a wet pool noodle to mowing over enemies like their grass, and you know, you're on one of those like 0 point, the cool ones. I'm going to show you the primary ones, and then the build link will include the other ideal ones that you would want to put on if you do find them. But the first one primarily is the Blade Dancers aspect. As soon as you find this, or as soon as you are able to unlock it from the dungeon, you need to unlock it because this is the one. And really quick, before I go over the actual aspect, you can unlock that here at Jalal's Vigil. If you can go right here and unlock that aspect immediately. And what this does is it synergizes properly with Twisted Blades, and they orbit around you for a short time after they return to you. So if you cast Twisted Blades enough, you dash across enemies, do a bunch of damage, they then come back to you, they then circle around you again and deal 10 to 15% of that actual return damage, which is some of the big damage for every single time it hits an enemy. Now, another important aspect you want that you can put on a ring or something is the Edge Masters aspect. This can go on whatever you want, but it basically deals increased damage based on your available primary resource via our energy. So when our energy is at max, we're going to be dealing more damage to enemies. And then on our boots here, you can see we have the Wind Striker aspect. So critical strikes grant increased movement speed for 1 second up to 6 seconds. We're going to be hitting enemies and doing crit strikes every single second, basically. So we're going to be able to stack a ton of movement speed here. And then on our ring here, you can see we have the accelerating aspect. Again, critical strikes with core skills increase your attack speed by 19. And then the other aspect, which is probably the third or second aspect you need, especially to help your survivability, and it's so good, is the aspect of Stolen Vigor. And this aspect synergizes with our key passive, and makes it so that each stack of the momentum key passive heals you for 73 life per second. And like I mentioned earlier, we constantly keep 3 stacks of this up, meaning right now this is going to heal us for around 210 health per second, and our life is only 1100. So first, when jumping into a fight, you want to cast Dark Shroud for the damage reduction. You can then cast Shadow Step to go into a group of enemies, and then you want to cast the Shadow Imbuement, so that way your next 2 imbuable skills deal shadow damage. You want to save this ideally for Twisting Blades, because Twisting Blades is going to give you the most impact on multiple enemies around you and infect the most enemies as possible. You immediately want to hit enemies with Twisting Blades if you can twice. That way you can go ahead and get them infected with the Shadow Imbuement, and then use Puncture to build your energy back up when needed. But more than likely, once you get all these skills set up, that Twisting Blades couple casts on enemies will generate you enough fury to hopefully last you the entire fight, so you almost never need to use Puncture a little bit later on in the game. Then once you cast Twisting Blades on an enemy, after about 2 or 3 casts, then you ideally want to dash across as many enemies as possible, so that way the returning blades, when they return to you, swipe across the screen and hit as many enemies as possible. That being said, if you haven't already, check out the guide in the description, like this video, and subscribe if you're new. I'm also giving a PC away, that link will be down below as well. Otherwise, check out one of these awesome Diablo 4 videos on the left or on the right. Thanks.